Okay, I see a lot of people have joined. First and foremost, thank you so much for your time. It's been a while since we've actually launched a new product into the MSP Flex program. So thank you all very much for your time. What we're going to talk about today is Managed Threat Response, or MTR, for MSPs. First, what it means for you as an MSP to operate within our Managed Threat Response service. And secondly, what the pricing looks like and what the business opportunity is. Joining me today is Eric. He is a Senior Product Marketing Manager for MTR. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to get started first, and I am going to go through a few slides just talking a little bit about MTR for MSPs. The first and foremost, the MTR for MSP version will be available on Monday, December 2nd. We decided to delay it a week. In the US, as you know, Thanksgiving holiday, and we wanted to make sure that we had a couple of things that we wanted to fix. So it will be available Monday, December 2nd, and we are going to provide 4 options for MSPs to implement and deploy Managed Threat Response. The first is a full response. So when you deploy this to your customer, if we see something that needs remediation or fixing, you can pre-authorize Sophos to provide a full response or full remediation of an issue that we detect. And Eric will talk more about that in just a second. We can secondly notify you as an MSP and instruct you on how to resolve that specific issue. Third, we can collaborate with you and require your approval prior to any response, or we can respond together. We could do a web share, we could do something, but we can work with you and your team to go and do any remediation that is required. And then the fourth option is, if you are a hybrid MSP/reseller, you can actually resell a 1, 2, or 3-year term to the customer directly. And in that scenario, that is a customer-owned license, perhaps managed by you, but you can set the contact to the customer directly. So any information that we have, notification, collaboration, or authorization to remediate will go directly to the customer and not you as an MSP. However, if you are purchasing MTR as an MSP on the monthly Flex program, then all of that communication will go to you as the MSP. MSPs are going to need to accept a new set of terms and conditions for MTR and Cloud Optics. I will paste this URL in the chat window so everybody has it, you can click on it. But this basically allows us, from a legal perspective, to offer a service to you as an MSP. And then lastly, one of the requirements for MTR is InterceptX Advanced with EDR. This is something that is required. And we have a new set of SKUs and a new price list that went out. If you don't have it, reach out to your channel account manager or your sales territory manager. But the SKU is Sophos Central InterceptX Advanced with EDR and MTR. I know it's not a short SKU, but it is up there. It is available. So if you do not have that pricing, reach out to your MSP channel account manager. And so as we look at all of these different versions or all these different products, including email and new Cloud Optics, we're going to follow the same principle and the same model when we calculate what that banded pricing looks like. So you still have the device category, and that is going to be, in December, will include the virtual firewall as a service. So it's basically taking the virtual pricing and making that a monthly Flex SKU as well. So that's pretty exciting. Servers, same principle, wireless, and then Cloud Optics is going to be its own specific category. And we have a webinar tomorrow for that. If you didn't get the invite, I'm assuming you did, but if you didn't, click on that link, and both of these webinars are going to be recorded. And so when we look at the end user license category, we have the endpoint products, phish threat, mobile, disk encryption, and email protection. Basically, what this means is that if you have 1,000 users, or if you have 500 users using, MTR, phish threat, and disk encryption, you will purchase at the 1,500 user license category. And so if you have a question about how that works, you can let us know. But as we do the aggregate license calculation on the users, devices, servers, wireless, and cloud, This is an aggregate across you as a MSP, across your entire customer base. Normally, when you buy a term license, it is, I have 10 users, I buy a 10 user license. If I have 20 users, I buy a 20 user license. What we do is we aggregate all of the user licenses across your entire customer base in order to calculate which pricing band you are going to purchase at. And so at this stage, I am going to turn it over to Eric to go into more detail on MTR and what it means to you as an MSP. Eric, take it away.
All right, yeah, thank you, Scott. I appreciate it. Hopefully I'm coming in loud and clear here.
Yes, you are.
Excellent, excellent. So yeah, we're really excited to be launching Sophos Managed Threat Response. This is the first service that we're going to be implementing, and we've designed a threat response service, and we've designed it to really help augment a lot of the capabilities that MSPs have, to be an extra partner as they're delivering services, provide something that's going to be cost effective, allows them to win deals that they weren't able to pursue before, and get a lot of great margin on top of it. So that's what I'm going to be talking through today, is what the service is, why we designed it the way we did, and what it includes. So we've got this marketing tagline, cybersecurity evolved. And marketing tagline though it is an important part of how we think. And it's really more important to think about the fact that the threat landscape is constantly evolving. So that's where I'm going to kind of start. We know that attackers, they're constantly looking for ways to evade detection. They know what tools we're putting in place to find them, to take action against them. And so we need to continually reinvent the way that we're finding them, detecting them, and then how we respond to their efforts to remain undetected. So that's where I'm going to start first, is with the threat landscape. If you look at threat landscape reports, as I'm assuming you do, you probably get frustrated by the fact that the vast majority of them focus on identifying just, what are the most common attacks? It's always based on volume and frequency. What do we see most often? And so we wanted to flip that on its head and say, we don't really care what happens most often. We care about what's most successful. What are the types of attacks, those techniques that attackers are employing that result in a successful breach? And there's four that really come to light that I want to highlight. And they'll be important as we kind of discuss our offering here throughout the session. So number one is an increase in living off the land attacks. So these are the types of attacks that attackers use where they are taking advantage of a legitimate tool or a legitimate process in order to evade detection. So these are things like PowerShell, things like PsExec, legitimate functions that were designed to make admins' lives easier that when co-opted and manipulated by an attacker can be used to help that attacker execute an attack. And they can do that and stay undetected because, again, these are legitimate processes. So even if the behavior is acknowledged by a tool, even if the tool sees that this activity is happening, it's not going to make the judgment call, or rather it can't make the judgment call that it's a malicious behavior. And because of that, it can't take action against that behavior, right? We can't shut down a legitimate process because that's going to result in an operational disruption. So any situation like that just by nature requires a human intervention. It requires someone to go in and investigate, is this an expected activity? Is it a known activity? And is it malicious in nature, or is it benign and something that we expected that maybe an admin in the system is doing? So we see this constantly as an initial way to gain a foothold in an organization and start to execute an attack, which comes in line with the next one here, which is automated compromise followed by a human-led farming. So we see this a lot with one of the most popular examples right now is probably Ryuk ransomware. So this particular strain of ransomware begins by first using automation to gain a foothold within the organization. And once it does that, a human being, a human attacker takes over, and that human attacker's sole goal is to, again, evade detection. So one of the first things that they will do is start working through the environment, looking for the security tools that would normally raise an alarm and shutting off those certain functions. So they'll start tampering with configuration so that they can continue to evade detection. And so again, how do you combat this? Well, the tools are one part of identifying some of the behaviors, but you still need a human being on the other end who's going to be really engaged in this cat and mouse scenario once that attack is triggered. This kind of lends itself into the third category here, which is compromising backups to encourage ransom payment. So we've seen this with SamSam ransomware. It's probably a popular example where the first thing that these attackers do is find your backups. So we've known for a long time that one of the best defenses against ransomware attacks is to make sure that you have accurate, up-to-date backups so that if your files are encrypted, you restore them from backup and hey, it's business as usual. Well, with these types of attacks, they're looking for those backups and deleting them so that you can't restore from backup. So again, we have a human attacker who's thinking through all the different controls that we have in place as security providers and finding ways to circumvent those things and increase their payload at the end of the day. And then the last one that I'll highlight, and probably one of the ones that is most insidious and concerning, is the exploitation of third-party vendors in the supply chain. So some of the most high-profile attacks that we see, those high-profile breaches that make headlines, resulted or started from a third-party compromise. So we saw this with Target, we saw this with Equifax, and these are the types of attacks where someone infiltrates your system through an outside partner or a provider that has access to your systems or your data. So you could be doing everything right in your environment. You can have all the appropriate security controls in place and have all the visibility, but you're going to be working with vendors who either have access to your data or even storing that data. And if that data is compromised, it can result in a compromise for your organization. We see this especially with things like RMM tools. So for MSPs, one of the foundations of how they operate is through these tools. And we know that they are increasingly compromised. They're increasingly a target for attackers. And we've seen a lot of high-profile attacks that started with an unpatched vulnerability with an RMM tool that resulted in an attacker gaining a foothold there and then being able to execute wide-scale attacks across an MSP's entire customer base. And this is part of the reason that we saw things like the Department of Homeland Security issuing a formal warning late last year saying MSPs are a target of these types of attacks, and in part because of these particular vulnerabilities that we see with RMM tools. And we've seen that research has found that 56% of organizations have had a breach that was caused by one of their vendors. So this is just one of the big ones that we're cognizant of, and you need to be able to have defenses in place. So what is kind of the thematic through line for each of these types of attacks that we're seeing? It's kind of counterintuitive. Everyone thinks that as things evolve and as technology becomes more complex and more widely democratized and available to folks like attackers, that it's going to result in more automation. Well, this is kind of the opposite. Each one of these attacks has a human element at its core, or a critical human element as part of the process. So how do you manage that? And that's really what the purpose is of managed detection and response, is to put a human being back in that loop, so that we're combining our tools with people and with efficient processes so that we can combat even these more sophisticated and more targeted types of attacks. So what is managed detection and response? Quick history lesson, the term MDR, Managed Detection and Response, was coined by Gartner in 2016. And they did it in response to this shift as they were starting to see more MSSPs move toward the direction of doing a little bit more in terms of threat detection and neutralization. So on the one hand, you've got, on the MSSP side, you've got much more of a focus on security technology management, building the foundation, providing those critical things that organizations need in order to start building their security operations or just their IT operations program. As you progress more to the right, you see this trend, the more focus on response, and that's why on the far end on the right there, you see threat neutralization. So Gartner has this concept of, are you a managed detection and response provider with a capital R at the end, or are you a lowercase r? And lowercase r's are the ones that are more toward the middle there. They're just focused on monitoring and alert and notification. Uppercase r's are those who will take action on your behalf. And that was a critical thing that we took into account as we were building our services. We wanted to make sure that on behalf of our partners, we were taking action to neutralize threats, not just alerting them to those threats, which just creates a different set of workload. So we wanted to take more off their plate instead of just adding more. And this is what we've seen from Gartner time and time again, that this quote, I think, does a good job of summing it up. But their clients who have the most successful security operations center have put their premium on people rather than process and technology. So people are the core element. And as we know, there's a massive shortage of qualified talent in security. It's difficult to find people. It's even more difficult to find people if you have some geographical constraints that make it difficult to find that type of talent. And then if you're lucky enough to find that type of talent, it's difficult to retain them. So security analysts have a shelf life in their current organization for, in most cases, less than a year and a half. So they take on a job and then they're going to move on to the next thing. So that ability to recruit, train, and then importantly retain that talent is even more difficult. So this is why MDR exists, is so that we can provide this type of service with the people to take that burden of having to recruit and train and retain those people. So what is the goal then? If we're kind of centering back on what are we trying to achieve here? Well, the goal of any security program is ultimately to be able to detect attacks on sensitive data assets and neutralize incidents before they become a breach. Now that's incredibly simple, to the point where you could probably have this written in crayon, and that's totally okay, but that is ultimately the objective. And to be able to do that, you're going to have 3 key functions. You need to have the ability to protect attacks, you need the ability to detect attacks on those assets, and then you need the ability to respond. And now what we've seen for the most part, as security operations and security programs have become a more important part of how organizations operate, and as more vendors come into the mix, the focus has been primarily on protect and detect. And with Sophos, we've got, I mean, we're the world-class leaders when it comes to those 2 capabilities, our proactive prevention, our ability to detect attacks. But what we've seen in the marketplace for a long time is the respond element has been lacking. And it's been lacking because the vast majority of services that are out there are focused on threat monitoring and notification. They will find things that are suspicious. They will then throw that alert over the wall to the customer or to their partner, an MSP. And then they will say, okay, we found this, it's critical, now it's your problem to take care of. We have a salesperson in the organization who likened it to hiring someone to come clean your house, and all they do is leave you a list of things that are dirty. That's where the majority of the marketplace is for these types of threat detection services. So we wanted to elevate that, and so we're seeing this constant frustration from customers of, you know, they've invested in a service that's supposed to be providing threat response actions on their behalf, and they're not taking action. They're only just letting me know of things that I need to take action on myself. And it defeats the purpose, because the idea was to again, minimize workload, to provide organizations with the ability to focus on their business rather than focusing on threat response. So when we built our service, our Managed Threat Response service, MTR, we wanted to make sure it incorporated these core elements. So number 1, 24/7 human-led threat hunting. So everything that our team does is led by a human. We might take advantage of automation. We might, of course, we're going to take advantage of tools, but everything that we're doing, every investigation we conduct has a human being who's doing that type of thing. And threat hunting is a critical part of that, because we know that threat hunting is one of those last lines of defense of finding those types of attacks that have evaded detection from tools. We know that attackers are going to continue to evolve. How do we think like an attacker and investigate those things that don't create an automated alert? How do we gather that information and look for new patterns of activity that could be indicative of a new indicator of compromise or a new indicator of attack? So threat hunting is a inherently pre-detection activity, and it is designed to find those types of things that only human beings can find, that tools cannot detect and certainly cannot take action on. Number 2, we investigate suspicious activity, not just detection. So again, we're looking at patterns of behavior. We're not just looking at the things that generate the alarm bell. We're looking at the things that don't generate the alarm bell, but if we look at them in the aggregate, maybe again, it's indicative of new attacker behavior. And then last, and again, most important, others stop at notification, whereas we take action. So we will work with teams to respond until those threats are neutralized, which is a huge kind of gap in the marketplace. So to illustrate this further, we have this concept of the 3 scenarios, and this just kind of distills, you know, and just make it very, very simple of how different types of response and detections and response are going to occur. So in scenario 1, we've got our detection on top, we've got our response on the bottom. And so in this particular scenario, a tool is going to detect an attack or suspicious behavior, and because that tool knows enough about that attacker behavior, it can automatically take a response. So again, this is what Intercept X with EDR is so good at. It's really good at this scenario because we have the intelligence to be able to identify those known bad behaviors and immediately take action against them. So we're covered there. Scenario 2, now we've got a tool that detects an attacker or suspicious behavior, but that tool does not know enough about that attacker behavior to automate a response. So again, this could be a behavior like the legitimate use of PowerShell or PsExec. The tool can't convict on that, can't take a response, can't determine whether or not it's malicious or benign. So this is where you have to have a human being who's going to conduct an investigation to find out the intent of that activity. Once the analyst determines what response actions to take, they will then execute on that plan on behalf of the MSP and their partners or their customers. And then the last part, and really a critical part of this, is every action that our team takes gets fed back into the tool set. So this is kind of the promise of machine learning, only we're using our human analysts to help continue training the machine. So every time we take an action, it gets fed into the system so that the system becomes more efficient at those scenario 1s. So we're making our people are making our tools better, and our tools are making our people more efficient, which frees them up to focus on things that matter, like conducting threat hunts and doing those things that only human beings can do. So what we've seen is most of the marketplace, again, this is where they stop. They stop at that point where they're going to conduct an investigation, they're going to make some determination, and then they're going to send it along to the customer and say, hey, we saw this, your turn to act on it and decide what actions need to be taken. So that's where most stop. So we're going to continue into scenario 3. So now we have a scenario where the tool does not detect an attack or a suspicious behavior. It doesn't see anything at all. And because it can't see anything, it's not going to take an action against anything. So this is where an analyst who's conducting a threat hunt is going to discover that brand new indicator of compromise or indicator of attack. They're going to conduct an investigation to find out if that particular behavior is malicious or benign. They're going to determine what actions need to be taken and take them, and they're going to feed all that information back to the system so the system can be smarter. So with Sophos MTR, we're addressing all 3 of these scenarios on behalf of our MSP partners and on behalf of their beneficiary customers. So that's what we wanted to do, is make sure that we're addressing this entire set. So how does it work? What does the service actually look like and how does it work? Well, let's start with response modes. So this is something that we took feedback from our partners and from customers, and this is really core to our offering. We give our customers and our partners the ability to choose the best way for our team to work with them. So we're not saying, here's how you work with us. We're saying, you've got options. Choose which option works best to augment the capabilities that you might already have. Because you might already have made investments in tools. You might have already made investments in people. Where can we fit to augment that and make what you have more efficient and more valuable? So we have 3 response modes: notify, collaborate, and authorize. And Scott alluded to these at the very top, but I'll go into a little more detail on what each includes. So with notify, this is again where most of the MDR providers are focused. We're going to be an extra set of eyes. We're going to see detections. We're going to prioritize those detections, and we're going to let you know about those and provide actions that you then have to take on your behalf. So again, we're there as a partner. We're an extra set of eyes looking at your environment and identifying things that matter so that you can take action against them. Now, organizations will do this, if they're either new to a service like this, or again, they have the internal infrastructure to handle response, and they just want someone to overlay on top to provide that extra set of eyes. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we have authorize. This is where our partners would effectively hand us the keys to the car and say, look, we've already pre-identified the actions that you're going to take in certain scenarios. We want you to take those actions on our behalf and then notify us of what actions you took and what you saw from that type of attack. Give us all the information that we need to have full visibility around what you did, why you did, how you did it, how you're going to prevent it from happening in the future. But we are empowering you, Sophos MTR, to take those actions on our behalf. And then splitting the difference between those is collaborate. Maybe there's some actions that you want to keep internal. Maybe there's some actions that you want us to take on your behalf. It's a collaborative relationship to identify what those types of things are, and we're providing that true augmentation and extension of your internal service capabilities. So organizations, regardless of what service tier you select, whether it's our standard offering or advanced offering, you can choose from any one of these response modes, and you can change these response modes over time. So if you decide that for your customers, maybe you've been in a notify mode to start, but you decide you would rather move to authorize midstream, you have the option to do that. You can go immediately to authorize, and this isn't based on pricing either. Normally when people see this slide, they'll think, well, of course, if you're doing more for authorize, that's going to cost more. That's not the case. These are independent of cost and independent of the service tier. It's just to provide flexibility of how you work with us and our team. So I mentioned the 2 offerings, standard and advanced, and I'll talk through the differences between those. So on our standard offering, again, everything starts with the ability to take response action. So again, we're going to take action on behalf of your team, regardless of whether or not you're a standard or advanced customer. In standard, we're doing lead-driven threat hunting. So lead-driven threat hunting is where we have certain bits of information that don't cross a certain threshold to yield what we would consider a detection. Now, a detection is going to generate a case for our team, and that case is going to yield a human-led investigation, someone who's going to go in and conduct a thorough investigation to determine the nature of that threat. But what do you do with all of those? That would be a strong signal. We see that detection, our team conducts an investigation. But what do you do with all those weaker signals, those things that don't cross that threshold, right? That's what lead-driven threat hunting is for. We're going to aggregate those bits and pieces of kind of causal and adjacent events that don't create a detection themselves. But if we look at them in aggregate and start to see patterns, again, it can reveal a new type of attack that we haven't seen before, that our tools aren't trained on, and certainly can't take action against. So that's the idea of lead-driven threat hunting. And adversarial detections, this is what I was mentioning before. We're not just looking at detections, we're looking at suspicious behaviors, and we can determine certain patterns that are going to be indicative of an adversarial behavior. So again, we know not every attack is going to rely on malware, but most successful attacks are going to be taking advantage of some legitimate function and using it for malicious purposes. So our tools give us the ability to identify those activities immediately so our team can investigate them and determine their true intent. The security health check, this is the very first thing that we do, and it's critical to how we operate. So as soon as a customer begins working with us, it triggers our team to conduct a health check of their Intercept X and EDR deployment. So what we're looking for there is making sure that everything is appropriately configured so that that tool is being used to optimal performance. We've been since July, we've been conducting these security health checks with partners and with clients, and we've seen as many as 58 things that were misconfigured, things that were turned off that should have been turned on that have the potential to result in a breach because it's just not configured correctly. So we're going to conduct that investigation, determine what things should be changed, and then notify the customer, here are all the things that we would recommend being altered and remedied to make sure you're getting the most out of that tool. The last part that we offer in standard is activity reporting, and I'll show an example of this on the next slide, but we put a lot of time into making sure that our activity reports provided useful information. So historically, security providers have produced these reports that are really just focused at the operator level. So they take all the operator level metrics, all the numbers, and they just kind of iconify them and make them look a little bit prettier, but it doesn't really provide any value to folks higher up in the organization. And as we know, security conversations are increasingly had at the board level, at the executive level. So we wanted to make sure that our reports spoke to both audiences. We were giving them the tactical operator level information, but we were also providing the business context and demonstrating the business ROI of investing in a service like this. Why do we need this type of service? What are some of the things that you're seeing that show the need to have a team watching 24/7 and using the tools that we use to identify these types of attacks? So we include that in standard. Now moving over to advanced. Everything that is included in standard is included in advanced, plus the following. And I would just succinctly characterize advanced as some additional higher level forms of more strategic forms of threat hunting, as well as more ways to engage directly with our team, to have deep communication with our team anytime that you want. So with advanced, we do leadless threat hunting. And I mentioned before with lead driven, that's aggregating those weaker signals and looking for new patterns of attack behavior. With leadless, we have no signals. All right, we are taking advantage of an analyst's intuition, their experience, their knowledge of how attackers operate. We're combining that with threat intelligence, and then we're combining that with everything that we know about the customer's environment. So what industry do they work in? Who are their high value targets? What are their high value assets? And that analyst who's conducting that threat hunt is going to come up with a hypothesis, thinking like an attacker. If I were to go after this particular asset in this particular environment, what vulnerabilities might I try to exploit to do that? And then we're going to run that hypothesis through almost like a mini penetration test to determine whether or not we have the appropriate security controls in place. If I take this action, does it trigger this alert? If it triggers this alert, does it give our team enough information to determine the intent of that particular activity? And so that is the intent of leadless threat hunting. And again, this is the last line of defense to identify those types of attacks that only humans can identify, that tools are either unaware of or can't take action against. Dedicated incident response lead. So from the beginning of an incident to the end of an incident, having a single person who's serving as a lead for that incident. And if that particular incident happens to extend, ideally we're shutting everything down immediately. That's going to be the vast majority of these types of things. But in the event that something happens where it requires multiple days or crosses over multiple shifts, because again, we're providing 24/7 coverage, that continuity is maintained by a team of people who share that information and make sure that there's a direct point of contact with our partners so that we're relaying all that information as it's happening. Direct call-in support, another thing that was really important to us to include, the ability to directly call in to our security operations center, kind of like a bat phone, call in and immediately start talking with the analysts. Now, most services will have some type of intermediary, some liaison, some customer success person that you have to manage through before you can actually start talking to the analyst. And we said, no, we want to have a direct line connecting the customer or the partner directly to our team to answer any and all questions that they might have. So for MSPs, this could be the scenario where you've got a customer and their CEO reads about the latest ransomware attack in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, calls you up, says, hey, should we be worried about this? You don't have to handle that. You can call directly into our team and we will give you a detailed answer as to all the controls that we have in place to protect against that particular type of ransomware, what actions we would take if there was an infection, and how we would prevent it from happening in the first place. Scheduled ops reviews. So this is an opportunity for our partners to schedule meetings with our teams to talk directly to the MTR team. Ask questions about what we saw in some of the latest reports, some of the recent cases that we worked, information about, if you're having an upcoming quarterly business review. Ask our team questions about what information might be important to bring up during those meetings. So again, direct collaboration with the team. Proactive posture improvement. Not only are we going to be doing all the work that we're doing to protect your environment, but we're also going to be providing proactive recommendations on how to prevent recurring incidents. So these are going to be things like architecture and configuration changes that maybe are going to be more focused on IT operations, but are going to be us making those recommendations to improve your security posture proactively. Asset discovery, this is our team's ability to identify managed and unmanaged assets. Effectively, do we have eyes everywhere across your environment that we need to? Are there certain blind spots that we need to be aware of? And do we need to make sure that we remedy those so that we have as much coverage across your environment, across your estate as we possibly can? And then lastly is enhanced telemetry. So because we're built on our tool set with InterceptX and EDR and with Sophos Central, our team is able to access any Sophos Central products that are currently deployed in the customer's environment. And we're able to do that and identify and take advantage of the telemetry from those sources to provide more context as we're conducting investigations. The more information our team has, the more they have to work off as they're conducting those investigations, and the better they're able to determine whether or not to determine the intent of the activity, and then to take an action against that activity.
Hey, Eric.
Yes.
I'm going to pause you for just a second. And I want to let everybody know that when we were looking at MTR and adding that to the MSP program, we actually were debating whether to include both standard and advanced. And we ultimately obviously decided to include both versions. But from a communication standpoint, for you as an MSP, the direct call-in support, the quote-unquote bat line, is absolutely something that that you need, in my opinion. And then when you look at asset discovery, enhanced telemetry, we'll go through that in a little bit, but I know it's a little bit more expensive, but when you do the cost analysis, which we'll do in a second for you, it actually makes all the sense in the world to go to an advanced offering versus, just the standard and, reacting based on something that we discovered. Eric, there's a couple of great questions in here that I think the audience would benefit from. The first is, can the response modes be different for different customers under the MSP licensing?
Right, so where we're at today is we're starting with a response mode that's applied universally across your customer set, but it is a function that we're exploring, and we understand that there are those use cases where it might make sense to have a different response mode for a different customer. So we've thought, as we built the product, we made sure that that functionality would be included, but as we start here, December 2nd, we're starting with it being universally across your entire customer set for the response mode. But those response modes, again, could be changed at any time. So you can start with notify, graduate to collaborate, and ultimately end with authorize. You have complete control there. Right now, that's where we're starting.
Great. The second question is, are you using Sophos InterceptX with EDR for MTR, or is there more software that I need to install?
That is it. Okay, that is a great question. Although it went in a different direction there than I was expecting it to. There's not more that you have to install. Everything is included as part of that bundle. So as you go through the onboarding process, you will simply be adding MTR functionality to the endpoints and to those customer environments. So everything is designed for complete ease of use. If you've been using our products before, you know how easy it is through that process, and everything is seamlessly aligned with that process. The note that I will make is our team, the MTR team, isn't just using InterceptX with EDR. So that is a component of what we're using, but we're also using another tool that's our MTR platform, which gives us even deeper visibility, especially into those adversarial detections that I was mentioning before. So we have the ability to take advantage of InterceptX with EDR, but we also have additional technology that gives our team more visibility into attacker activity, so that we can, find more things, find more needles in the haystack, and swiftly take action against them.
Fantastic. In MTR, both standard and advanced, scheduled reports are sent to the client, ? And if so, how often?
Reports will be sent to the partner, the MSP, and they're currently set to be delivered on a monthly timeline. Over time, we'll probably make those even more frequent, or the ability to have them be delivered more frequently. But for now, they're monthly reports that are delivered to the MSP partner, not directly to the customer. Unless you're in a term engagement, if you've done a resell and we're working directly with the customer, not through the MSP, then we will provide those reports directly to the customer. But for MSP Flex, all of that communication is managed through and exclusively through the MSP partner.
Great, and I know that this is a tricky question, and you know it's future looking, but will MTR also monitor Office 365 logs?
Yep, that's a roadmap question. This person should join the roadmap team. We're moving in that direction, and we will get there soon. That is a midterm, not long-term thing. So this isn't me saying that. I can't give you a date. I would get killed for doing that, but I'll say it is in the near-term roadmap to include that capability.
Yeah, and I'll add that we're looking at these quote-unquote add-ons for a variety of different services that our MTR team can implement. And I think that leads into this question. If they have an XG firewall, does telemetry look at / detect malicious activity on other devices on the network, such as IoT devices?
So our team, here again, our team has access to that telemetry. Again, in the very near-term roadmap, we're developing a direct connector with our XG firewall tool, which will give us enhanced capabilities there. So when I noted on the advanced tier offering, enhanced telemetry, if you were going to point out one thing that's just going to get better and better and better, it's going to be that piece. So right now, our team has access to the telemetry, but as we build out connectors, we're going to be including things like O365, as was mentioned before, Active Directory, XG firewall, Gmail, all of these things will be woven directly in and have a direct connection to our team, so we have even broader visibility than we do today.
Outstanding. There's actually another great question about onboarding. How long does it take to onboard a client, and what are the cliff notes on how that works?
Yep. So effectively, answering the time part first, when we first started our early access program for the service, we had a customer zero. A new customer to us, didn't have any of our existing products, and we provided them the guidance that we provide to any of our customers during onboarding, and they were able to complete the entire process and have the endpoints they wanted with MTR in less than 10 minutes. So it is very, very fast to do that. The Cliff Notes version of how that function is actually going to work is you're going to get your activation code, same thing as other products, you're going to activate that within Central. The first thing that you're going to do is identify who your escalation contacts are within your organization. So our MSPs will have the option to select between 1 and 3 escalation contacts. These are the people that the MTR team is going to be reaching out to as we escalate things, as we're seeing things. It's our main point of communication. And then we're going to ask you to select your initial response mode, notify, collaborate, or authorize. From that point, those settings will be applied universally across all of your customers, but you will have the opportunity to go into your customer accounts and assign different escalation contacts for different customers. So someone asked a question before, can you assign different response modes to different customers? Right now, that's no, but what we can do is provide different MSP contacts serving as escalation contacts for different customers. Is that, am I explaining that okay, Scott? Is that
You hit the nail on the head. I think there's one caveat to that on the MSP model. What you would do is you would update the policies in Sophos Central and activate the license to add MTR to your existing endpoint installation. There's no activation key or license code. And then we'll automatically pick that up in the next billing cycle on the 22nd of each month. There's a couple of other questions here. What if a client has no Sophos security products? Will MTR work? The answer is no. Will MDR monitor network traffic outside of endpoints?
So right now, only through the telemetry that we're able to get through our XG firewall tool, but that's the intent of that connector that we're going to be launching next.
Great. If I already have InterceptX but no MTR, can I add an MTR, or do I need to go with the new SKU? You have to go with the new SKU because it's going to be a single product, similar to what we did with SIXA, and then you had SIXA EDR, and now you have SIXA EDR MTR as the SKU. So as soon as you update it, it will automatically be picked up in the next billing cycle as that new specific SKU. There are a couple of really good questions that I want to get to here, Eric. The first is, what additional performance impact does the software have on the endpoint?
I'm gonna say minimal. If you're just talking about like any type of operational slowdown or anything like that, we started with our early access program in July, had 90 plus customers in there. We made the service generally available outside of MSP Flex in early October or late September. We have not had any type of support issues around that. If you need more specifics on that, though, then let's certainly do a follow-up and we can get a little bit more into the weeds on that particular question.
Great. And here's a million-dollar question for you. Other security vendors have tried unsuccessfully to set up their own SOC as a service. What are we doing to make sure this excellent service doesn't fizzle out after a year?
Yeah, I mean, the number one thing that I would point to, great question. That's definitely how people should be, how people are thinking about this. But the number one reason is because this service that we're offering with Sophos MTR comes by way of acquisition of Rook Security, which is the team that I came from, and we've been delivering this service since 2008. And so we've been, when Gartner, I mentioned before, when they coined the term managed detection and response, we were among the first to be included in that report. And same thing for all the analyst firms. As Forrester started producing their NowTech report, effectively their version of the Forrester Wave for managed detection and response, we were considered in their top category. So only 7 providers in the world were included in that top category, and Rook Security was one of them. So we've been doing this work for a very long time. We know how to operate this type of service. It's a new service to Sophos, but it is not to our team. That I think is the big difference. We're not building this from scratch. We're taking an engine that was already running at peak performance and just dropping it into a new chassis.
Excellent. There's several questions about where the SOC is located. The SOC is located in Indianapolis, is that right?
Yeah, we are centrally located in Indianapolis. We will be building additional security operations centers around the globe, starting first with Cork, Ireland, because I want to visit there from time to time.
Excellent. There was a question about the requirements for MTR. I mentioned it earlier. So it's the CICSA EDR SKU that you can add MTR on top of. However, if you have endpoint protection today, if you have InterceptX alone, if you have CICSA alone, you can basically add the MTR SKU on top of anything. So it is the MTR SKU, and then the product will simply update and you're good to go. From an NFR standpoint, we are offering the NFR at 45% off of the 1-year term license, so you could do that. Can you provide, Eric, more detail on the response? What exactly will MTR be doing to my devices?
Yes. Okay, so we won't be doing anything to devices specifically, and actually, I unfortunately don't have the slide in this deck, but we've got a useful documentation of here are all the types of actions that you can expect our team to take. Also available online now, we have our managed detection or managed threat response service description, which I promise you is not a typical service description that's kind of riddled with legalese and jargon that you want to be able to understand. We try to make it very simple. So if you search for that document, just do a quick Google search for Sophos Managed Threat Response service description, you will see, we laid out very plainly, here are the actions that we'll take, here are the actions that we will not take. So you know exactly, what things to expect from our team. But again, we effectively have every ability to take actions to neutralize threats on your behalf, and it's laid out more succinctly in that document. So I would point you to that for now.
Okay, so there's a bunch of questions about examples of actions. What we'll do is we'll follow up with some information for all of those individual questions. Let's, I think we have a couple more slides. Let's just go through those slides and then we'll continue to go through the Q&A. You guys have some fantastic questions, so keep them coming while we finish up the presentation, and then we'll go from there.
All right, so I mentioned before the monthly report. So this is a sanitized version of one of our reports. And again, we designed this so that it would be useful to all levels of an organization. So at the top left, you're seeing the overall protection rating. That's largely going to be an outcome of what we found as we conducted your initial health check. Just below that, you have visibility into the number of nodes that we have protected. So you can see here, 869 unprotected nodes. This is areas where our team doesn't have visibility and can't take any of those response actions. So that's an area we want to have constant visibility. We need to get as much coverage as possible. Skipping to the bottom, you can see that kind of funnel from here's the raw number of detections that we're seeing. How many of those required a case? How many of those crossed that threshold and required an analyst to conduct an investigation? And among those, how many of those had input that needed to be escalated? Our goal, again, we don't want to create more noise. We're not trying to be, alert throwers that are just constantly sending stuff your way, because we know that is, many organizations don't have the infrastructure to actually identify those things and conduct those investigations. So we want to minimize that as much as possible. Our goal is to have as few escalations as possible and certainly prevent any incidents from happening. On the bottom there, if you're familiar with the MITRE attack framework, all of our detections map to MITRE. So we're not just seeing that something happened. We know specifically what type of tactic and technique was being employed as part of this potential attack. So not all of these things are going to be malicious in nature, but these are the activities that we're seeing and can take action against. In the middle there, after hours detections, this is probably one of my favorite, because this is the one that I think really speaks most to the business side and the business case for why a service like this is so important. We're looking at all of the detections that we're seeing during non-working hours. So between 5 p.m. and 8 a.m. the next day, what's the activity that we're seeing? We know that attackers are increasingly looking at those times to conduct attacks because they know their targets are going to be softer. And we know that they know that many organizations are not, if they have one dedicated security person, they're certainly not going to have 3 to have that 24/7 coverage. So we're looking at the volume of that type of attack and what activities we're seeing during those off hours to further demonstrate the value of having a team of experts who's watching your network 24/7. And I'll point out too that there are services that are MDR-like services where they have people who are effectively, on call, on pager duty. That is not how we operate. We have a security operations center, again, based here in central Indiana, and this is 24/7 analyst eyes on glass. They're not being rung up at home. They're looking at environments 24/7, 365. So just wanted to point that out as well. And then we're also able to defend some trend data. So the most important data that you can have is data about your own or your customer's own environment, and we're able to identify what trends are we seeing over time. All right, so getting into to build versus buy, this is where the conversation can go for many organizations. Maybe we want to have this capability internally, or maybe we want to outsource it. So Scott's going to talk through, how we kind of map this together of the things that you need relative to their costs.
Yeah, and so we had a prior example that showed 1,000 user organization. And when you look at 1,000 user organization and the endpoint detection and response product itself and some of the tools that are associated with that, the build cost is quite significant. And so we built a lot of these prices into the tools, the people, and the process. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to kind of remove any doubt and have a relatively conservative estimate to demonstrate the actual cost associated with delivering MTR, but then take that one step further and say, listen, you're eliminating workflow, alert processing, intelligence feeds, honeypot networks, automation, proactive blocking, right? A lot of stuff that you guys just don't want to deal with, frankly, and you shouldn't be dealing with. And then when you look at the process, the incident investigation and verification, what is the hunting methodology that you would actually go through if you were to do this internally and build out a MTR offering or a SOC offering? If you look at the events and alerts and alert management, notification, tool management, tuning, all of that stuff, I zeroed that out, right? Because it's a cost, and it's a cost, but let's look at it as a zero cost. Let's look at the product licensing fee only, at $40K for EDR. And then how do you build a service on top of that? It's going to require people. A SOC manager, most geos, you're not going to get a SOC manager for $150K. You're certainly not going to get 3 senior security analysts for $100K each, and then an engineer for $110K. You might in specific US geographies or other geographies around the world. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to say, listen, it's a no-brainer, right? You're not going to be able to build out a 24/7 SOC with security analysts that can do this type of work. So if we look at the build cost of everything, you're talking about $720,000 annually for about 1,000 users. Maybe you can go up to a little bit higher. But when we look at the pricing for the CICSA EDR MTR SKU, for 1,000 aggregate users across your entire customer base, the delivery of that SOC service would be approximately $120,000. And so that's basically $10,000 a month, which is probably what you're paying a lot of the folks on your team today that are doing a lot of the security analysts or analysis. And so one thing that a lot of the MSPs that I've talked to really around the world about is, what are you going to do? Is it a build versus buy, or if you're going to outsource all of the SOC capabilities, what is that person going to do? Well, they can actually focus on a lot of additional revenue generating opportunities. They can begin to operate as a sales engineer. They can offload a lot of the technical work that you as a CEO might be doing, so that you can focus on growing the business and instead of being in the business. So there's a lot of benefits. And if I'm wrong, please let me know. Please send me a message. I think that when you look at the price of $120K and then you wrap that into your existing managed services agreement, or pull out all the security products and tools and services in your existing managed services agreement, and then offer a higher value security agreement on top of your base agreement, that is where we see the industry going. That's where a lot of our MSPs are moving towards. And we have another presentation that we do with a slide that talks about how to break out security from your managed services agreement and then add a 50 or even a double, 100% premium on the managed services agreement for security services. And that would include everything, things like firewall, mobile, phishing simulation, email, endpoint protection, on and on and on, and how to build out that security practice rather than you going and creating your own, MSSP or trying to transition from being an MSP to an MSSP. Be an MSP, that's what you know how to do, then layer selling security services on top of that. And that is where everybody that I talk to is going. And that's where a lot of the MSPs that we have are actually making a significant amount of money. So I think that is the last slide. We do have a bunch of additional questions coming in.
Yeah, actually, Scott, I wanted to make sure that the question around actions didn't go unanswered. So I actually asked our Matt Gangwer, our director of security operations, so he's the one who runs the entire SOC team, to join for a second and talk through more specifically some of those actions and provide some more clarity there.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, hello everybody. So Eric asked me to talk about some of the actions that we can take in the MTR team, and we right now have two ways that we can do that. So through kind of the central environment, we're able to take the actions that are present within central. So we can isolate hosts, we can use some of the different application control and URL and IP filtering, block caches, and things like that. But that's purely from kind of an InterceptX standpoint. We also have some additional capabilities on the MTR side, where we have response playbooks that allow us to do more granular and targeted actions, and those are constantly being worked on to where we can grab a file off of the endpoint that we believe is malware or malicious for further investigation, terminating processes, and other things like that. The last kind of functionality that provides us, I guess, the most overarching response capability is a feature called Live Terminal. And Live Terminal is kind of our, I always refer to it as like a break glass switch. So if we're unable to take the actions that we need with the kind of native and built-in functionality, we have Live Terminal, which establishes a secure administrative console to that endpoint. And this is something that isn't enabled by default. We have to turn it on. There's approvals on our side to do that. And then there's also a full audit log available, so you'll know who did it, what commands they issued, and everything. But then we're able to really get granular with what we're able to do on that device or on that endpoint, and take the necessary response actions.
All right, thanks, Matt.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Thank you. I'm actually sitting in a room with Travis, and he actually wanted to make a clarification as well on the 120K.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the slide that we're looking at tonight, and I realized that we're not accounting on the left side of this for any kind of antivirus or endpoint protection side of the house, which is absolutely included in that 120 on the right side.
Yeah, so that includes the next gen endpoint protection as well as all of the EDR. And with EDR, you got to remember that there's a ton of storage required about the threats and logs and so forth like that. And then there's the human element, the people that are going to be required. So yeah, I mean, you take the difference between EDR SKU and MTR SKU, which I believe was about $6. We did this analysis earlier. So just over half of that 120 would actually be associated with licensing of the product. So when you break that out specifically, you're still talking about 50K now for the MTR, again, for a 24/7 service for your customers. So a couple of other questions. Do I need special agreements for data being submitted? I'm not sure if you could clarify that a little bit from the customer. If you could clarify that a little bit, Brent, that would be fantastic. What actions are you taking to malicious actors so that they can't take advantage of your live terminal?
The live terminal is a outbound initiated, so there's no like open ports necessary to be opened up to allow that. So it's basically everything. There's like a response or orchestration layer that exists within the MTR agent, and when there's a new kind of action and the action is a terminal, it'll be established. It's encrypted communications between us and the backend and our analysts working on it. But to answer that in more detail, I would have to get with our engineering team to see what other protection mechanisms are in. So I think the question is it possible to be like tampered with? And my off the cuff answer is going to be no, but I'll get a formal answer for that.
Great, thanks. And there's a couple of questions from a business perspective here, and I just want to make it clear that Sophos is a 100% channel vendor. Channel first, channel best. There are no minimums, fees or commitments that are associated with the MSP Connect Flex program. And it's similar to this. There's no minimums on managed users within an MSP's customer base. A question on the report, Eric, is the monthly report automatically generated and emailed to recipients of our choosing?
The reports, when they are generated, are sent directly to the escalation contacts defined by the MSP. So they will be first defined to those contacts, which gives them the opportunity to review those reports, find necessary information, and also do things like co-branding, including them in their regular updates and things like that.
Fantastic. And there's a few questions about getting some more information on MTR. So on our website, sophos.com, you can go. Sophos MTR service description is up there. So just go to the website, search MTR, and it will bring up absolutely everything you need to know. In addition to that, you have a full MSP team that is dedicated to your success. You also have a field territory team and a bunch of sales engineers as well that are dedicated to the success of MTR, but also all of the other products that we have to offer. I want to be very conscious of time. I know it's 12:01. If you have additional questions or if you want this presentation, I know I'm going to regret this, but please send me an email. It's scott.barlow@sophos.com, and I will distribute this presentation. We also have recorded this session, and it will be posted on our YouTube page. If you do not have access to the YouTube page or you don't know where to go, it's Global MSP. I will send me an email. I'll also send you that link. And if you are an existing partner, which all of you are, on the partner portal, you'll see MSP Hub. You have to be MSP Connect Flex, meaning that you have the ability to set up monthly customers. if you have that ability and you are MSP Connect Flex, you will see the MSP Hub on the top banner of Partner Portal. Click on that link and we will be posting a lot of additional information up there as well. That's kind of one of the go-to places to gather all of the presentations, all of the webinars, all of the integration scripts for the RMM and the PSA integrations that we have done and that we will continue to do. So with that said, again, if you have specific questions that were unanswered, let me know. I'll loop in the teams. And more importantly, if you have any question or if you need anything, reach out to the team. We're here for your success, and thank you very much for your time today. Bye-bye.